We've had a lot of rain in southern Appalachia over the last week, and I can't believe how good the garden's doing because of that rain. That first day that it rained, the following day, I swear, during the night, things seemed to grow by inches. It was just really was getting dry, and the plants really needed that rain. But I'm going to walk around in the garden and show you how things are doing. Actually, I'll start right here. These are just wild blackberries, but you can see the blackberries are beginning to get ripe. There's a lot of blackberries on this little set of briars, just come up naturally. But I hope they all get ripe for me so that I can have some blackberry jelly. That's my favorite jelly. I've especially enjoyed my flowers just outside the kitchen this year. The nasturtiums have just been beautiful. Various colors and variegated ones down through there. They're just lovely. Katie planted some different varieties of calendula this year. She makes calendula oil for us. That's an amazing product if you could buy it somewhere. It really heals unbelievably burns and cuts and scrapes. I swear it works overnight. It's like a miracle thing for us. It really works good. Zinnias are getting ready to pop out. I love zinnias. They're one of my favorite flowers. Someone got Granny a dianthus for Mother's Day, and she insisted on giving me a piece of it, so it's doing well. Marigolds are getting ready to bloom. Hostas are getting ready to bloom in this bed right outside the window. The peonies they've long since done. Katie's Sweet Williams down there in the lower part are blooming. They bloom all summer long. More calendula that Katie's started there. The orange, that's a different variety than we usually grow. One of my favorite things growing out here is hollyhocks. Granny grew hollyhocks when I was growing up. She had all different colors that grew outside the kitchen, kind of like how mine are doing. But I don't know why I never thought about growing them. And last year, Katie bought a packet of seeds somewhere and planted them. And I'm just in love with them. Now I want to see how many different colors I can get. And I hope they all continue to grow outside my kitchen, just like Granny's did. It's funny how you forget about, I was thinking, how could I forget about a flower that is so lovely and that was such a part of my childhood? I don't know how, but I did. So I'm glad that I've made friends with hollyhocks again this year. In this first little bed right here is where we have some rattlesnake beans. They're doing really good. There's some blooms on them, so I'm sure that we'll be eating those pretty quickly. I can't wait to try them. In the little edge here, I have 1 or 2 cucumbers that are starting to bloom. On this half of the trellis down here is where I planted the turkey crawl beans that someone sent me. I planted them twice, but I only got 2 to come up somehow. But they look like they're going to produce, so at least I'll get to taste them and see what I think about them. And then I have a little bit of cucumbers. This is where the 2 grapevines were, one on each end, that kind of got bit by that late frost, and one of them has come back and's got leaves all over it, and the other one has not, so I don't know if it killed it. I'm still hoping that it'll come back out. Also in this bed with the turkey crawl beans, we have purslane. I have it a lot of places coming up. It just grows wild. It's one of the superfoods people tell you about. You'll hear people talking about superfoods, and I really like it. I pick the leaves and put it in salads. You can also cook it. I've not really ever cooked it. I just like the taste of it in my salads. And back there in the back, there's a volunteer watermelon coming up. I had watermelons, little sugar babies, growing on this trellis last year, and there's a watermelon. I guess one of them, maybe one of the ones that some animal ate before I could eat them. Anyway, left a seed, so I have a watermelon back there. Up here in this raised bed is where I have more blackberries, and they've got a lot of berries on them too. They're tame blackberries though. They're the ones that we've planted. I have a couple of candy roasters that are doing pretty good. They're beginning to vine out. And then I have, you can see that whole mess of tomatoes. And those are volunteer tomatoes, and I just couldn't resist. I mean, I just couldn't make myself pull them up. I probably need to pull them up. But I was going to wait and see if I could tell, once they started producing fruit, if I could tell what they actually were. I'm guessing that they're some type of tomato, probably a black cherry, or maybe something else. I'll just have to wait and see. Katie's herb bed's really going crazy, as you can see. The yarrow's just beautiful, but it's beginning to fall over. Cilantro's beginning to go to seed. It needs to be cut back. The dill plants are doing really good, beginning to go to seed. They're so pretty, I think, and I love the smell of dill. It just smells so clean. She's harvested a lot of the oregano and also the lemon balm, but she could probably stand to harvest some more. This cattle panel trellis and these beds, they're really doing great. We have peppers, a lot of different peppers, got little bitty ones on there. The cucumbers, that was what was amazing once the rain started. They just started going crazy, growing, they're climbing up. I seen a little, 2 or 3 little cucumbers down there yesterday, so I guess in another week I should have, maybe not even a week, 2 or 3 more days, I should be able to eat our first cucumbers, which is exciting. There's some tomato plants here at the end with some little tomatoes. You can see they're doing good. Over on this side we have some more peppers. Katie's yarrow's falling over on them, and some cantaloupes and some melons that are starting to climb. As you can see, I still have the one big jewelweed back there and I did move the other ones. They didn't live though once I moved them. We also have some ground cherries coming up in this one. I love ground cherries, and they come up every year once you get them started usually. And another tomato right here that's beginning to produce, but no ripe ones yet. This is the sorrel plant that I planted that I told you I wanted to get a start of. So it looks like it's going to begin to bloom and go to seed, some kind of little bloom there. So I'm just going to let it do that, and then I hope that it'll continue to grow in this little area of this bed. We'll see. That's just kind of an experiment. I have eaten a few of the leaves and put them in my salads, and I like the lemony flavor, but I've not cooked any yet. So here's the jewelweed that I let grow. It's going to be as tall as I am. I probably really should move it. I just can't bear it. No blooms on it yet though, it's still too early for that. The tomatoes in this bed, these are my Juliets. They're doing good. Not as good as Farmer Teddy's, but maybe they'll come on as the summer goes on. But they are setting fruit, so you can see down there, every plant about it has fruit on it. So they're doing pretty good. I can't wait. The sunflower in the end, I think that's one that not sure if I planted this one last year or if I did have one here last year, so can't remember if this is like a volunteer or if I replanted it this year, but it's going to be huge and beautiful. It's not blooming yet though. And I have a little plant of basil. None of my basil I planted come up, so I ended up buying some at the store, so that's where I put one of them. This is the bed that I showed you last time that I said was the asparagus bed. You can see it's got a sunflower in it too that's volunteered. And it's the one that had been took over by Corey's herbs. I don't know what kind it is, but as you can see, I've still not done nothing about that. I've still not cleaned it out. It's still on my to-do list. It's just one of those things I'm dreading, but the more I dread it, the worse it's getting, so I'm only hurting myself. So in this bed, this is where our Cherokee purples are, and they're still doing really good. They've got a lot of fruit set on them, nothing ripe yet, but they're doing great. In this front portion of the bed, here's some of Katie. She loves this wild apricot, and it grows everywhere. It's what we call it. Some people call it passion fruit. But you can see the Malabar spinach is beginning to grow up. I'm just crazy about it. That one's not hardly long enough yet, but it will be there we go, catch it on. So it's beginning to grow up. So the tomato plants that we put in the containers down the length of the greenhouse, they are just growing unbelievably. Someone left a comment and said I would be surprised by how large they got, and I really am. I think they said that it was because the roots can get air through the fabric bags, but they're just amazing. And they have fruit on them. This was mostly the ones that Katie got me for Christmas, was the Nebraska Wedding, and then a green one. I can't remember the name of it, but a green one, but no ripe ones yet. This up here in the front, this is what's called a lychee tomato. I've never grown it before, and I just couldn't resist. It just sounded so intriguing. I have no idea if we'll like it, if I'll ever grow it again, but you can see how huge it is. The interesting thing about it is that it has spikes on it. See those spikes? And yes, I've run into it more than once. So it will grab you. It has those beautiful yellow flowers though, and the bees are just crazy over it, just crazy. So the taste, it's supposed to have red fruits, and they're beginning to set fruit, and the taste is supposed to be similar to a tomato. I've heard some people say it was sweet, other people say it's like a tart cherry. If it's like a tart cherry, I'm probably not going to like it. But I just couldn't resist. Sometimes I just love to try unusual things. So you can see there, that's one of the fruits. You see all the little spines, and then it gets like a papery, the outside will be like a papery husk, and the fruit's actually inside that. So if you've ever grown lychee tomatoes, please let me know. Tell me if you liked them or if it was worth it. And then I've even read and seen on some videos people talking about that it can actually be a perennial plant in certain places. It will stand some frost. So I can't really imagine that it's gonna, there's a bee down there. You can see the bees are just crazy over it. I can't imagine that it would live through the winter here, but maybe it'll live through the first frost, which would be good if I really like the fruit. If I don't like it, it won't be that great. But anyway, just something I wanted to try. And so far, it's doing really well. In this little bed, we have some squash and some zucchini, some basil out there in the end. And this was the asparagus bed that we just planted last year, so we didn't really harvest anything from it this year. I've got some blooms in there, you can see. So the squash that I harvest, the first squash that I harvest will probably come from this bed. You can see some of our grapes growing here. This grapevine didn't get hurt by the frost. The two in the back, which we only planted them last year, so I didn't expect that we'd have grapes on them, but they both got bit completely back, both of them, by the late frost that we had. But it didn't hurt these more established ones in the front of the house. Along the length of this, we have some crowder peas growing. Jim Cassida shared his crowder peas with me, so I'm excited and about them to try them for the first time. And there's some blooms on them already, so maybe it won't be long. And then I also still have some lettuce growing here. Down here in this part of the garden, we have two more cattle panel trellises on two right beside each other, and that's where we're growing some of our other tomatoes. Mountain Princess, that's a variety that we grow every year, and then this year we're trying one Ace 55. I don't know, it just sounded interesting, so I'm trying it. But so far they're doing very well and they're setting fruit, but again, none ripe yet. Not yet time for my tomatoes to be ripe here in southern Appalachia. In the largest part of our garden right here is where we have our beans, our greasy back beans. That's the majority of the beans we grow. We also have some bush beans that are just now ready to pick. And I can't remember, I believe the variety is Contender is one of them. And then also a jade bean. Just different ones I wanted to try this year. We've never grown them. Our favorite bush bean is a Yount's bean, which is kind of a bean seed that's been handed down in the Junaluska section of this county for several generations, and we were lucky enough to have a friend who shared the seeds with us several years ago, and we've been growing those and we really like them. But I'm anxious to find out if I like these others or not, and I plan to pick my first mess of bush beans today and have them for supper tonight. Another thing we grow in this biggest bed is our okra. So we usually do 2 long rows, and that produces more than enough for us to eat and to put up and to put in soup or anything like that. I try to make a soup base every year to can. Gives us enough for that. The first time I planted them, we didn't have good germination, and so I had to replant, but now pretty much I have 2 long rows that have all germinated and all coming up. My favorite okra to grow is Jing Orange. So True Seed has that. That's usually where I get mine. I think I also planted some, can't remember the exact name of it. I'll try to remember it and put it on the video, but Grandpa's, and it's a green variety, and I like it as well. Another thing we have in this large bed is our row of cabbage. Actually, it's cabbage and maybe 1 or 2 kohlrabi in there. And it's covered. We covered it. This is the first year that we've ever used row covers to grow cabbage, and I cannot believe how good they've done. I mean, I will never grow cabbage or kohlrabi any other way except under a cover like that. Now, the thing we messed up on is that we didn't buy large enough, our hoops are not large enough, so our cabbage are kind of getting squished in there, but they're still going to be good, and I just can't believe the difference. And I didn't really mean to, but I kind of did a trial test because I thought I was putting all my cabbage under there. I didn't really mean to put any kohlrabi, but I did somehow put 2. So then over in the garden, the other area of the garden where my beets and stuff are at, I did plant some kohlrabi there. well, I'd never grown it before, so I didn't really think about it being like cabbage, but it was eat alive by the little bugs, the little larvae of the moths that get on there. It was just eaten alive. And I used diatomaceous earth on it, and that helped some, but it's like one of those things, like you look at it every day, and then all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, what's eating my kohlrabi? But it was almost too late for it. And so the diatomaceous earth helped, and there's some new growth coming out now, but the kohlrabi that's under the cover, nothing, no bugs, because they couldn't get to it. So that's just the best way. I told Matt, from now on, that's how we'll do our cabbage and our kohlrabi, and we will between now and next year get larger hoops though, so that the cabbage has more room to spread out. In this little area right here, this is where some of our spring stuff is still at. We have onions that we've been eating. Some of them are beginning to flop over. I'm going to have to harvest them and let them start drying. We have beets that are getting ready to be able to be harvested. I hope that I have enough to make a run of pickled beets. And then we have some beans. We replanted the Yance beans, because the first time we planted them, somehow they didn't come up either. But this time most of them come up, so we have some of those coming up and coming on right over there. This huge plant behind me that you can see is bee balm. I don't even remember exactly where I got it or where it come from. It comes back every year, and every year it's taller. So you can see it's already, some pieces of it are already taller than I am, but it's really beautiful, and the pollinators, they love it. You can just see them over here working. Once it starts blooming, you'll just see them. It's just covered in a hive of activity. It's really a beautiful plant, and it's medicinal, and I believe that you can make tea with it. In this part of the garden, we have some lettuce that's still hanging on that we've been harvesting. We have some corn beginning to come up. We've not planted corn in ages because we really just don't have a good place up here to plant it. But we just stuck a few kernels in here and there, and I don't know if it'll do anything or if it'll produce, but we've got it coming on. We've got squash and zucchini up here in this top part, and then in the lower part down there we have a lot of pumpkins and a few watermelons and things that are vine, and we usually just kind of let them go crazy down through there on that part. Just behind me here I have a whole little bunch of, I believe it's called coreopsis. It comes up every year. It kind of gets on Matt's nerves, but I say let it. I love the volunteers of flowers sprinkled in throughout the garden. I also have a whole little colony of sunflowers over there. I planted those last year, and then they've reseeded themselves, and then I planted some more down below them, so I've got a whole little colony. Some of them are really tall, some of them are more of the miniature size, so they don't get as tall, but I just think they're a lovely addition to the garden. I think I say this every time, at every point, at every month, but it is true. The garden is just beautiful. It's just such a rewarding thing to come out every day to plant these by the sweat of your brow, to prepare the garden and then to plant them, and then to come out every day and check on your plants almost like they're part of your children or part of your family. It's just a wondrous thing, and then to be able to eat the bounty of what they produce for you. So we've had all of our spring things. We've been eating onions and lettuce and radishes and all that kind of stuff. We're going to get to eat beans this afternoon, and within another week we'll be eating cucumbers, and then probably a week or so after that we'll be eating those wonderful ripe tomatoes. It's just such a joyous time of the year to be able to eat directly from the things that you put in the ground, and it's so much healthier for you. There's that, but it's just so much better. It just tastes so much better. Something you grow in your yard just has such a better taste than something that you buy in the grocery store. The blueberries are all doing good too. Most of my varieties of blueberries are a late bearing variety, so they won't ripen until late July, early August, so we still have a ways to wait on them. But blueberries and watermelon are my two favorite fruits, so I'm willing to wait no matter how long it takes on the blueberries. I hope you've enjoyed this little tour of the garden, and I hope that you'll share what's going on at your house, what's going on in your garden. I told Matt the other day, last weekend we worked and we got all the beds mulched and all the ones at Granny's mulched, and then that we were exhausted, but we were chasing ourselves against the rain, trying to race against the rain before it got here. We also needed to mow the yard and weed eat, and we got it all done, but we were exhausted. And as we sat around that night, I said, well, Matt, it's almost like the old timers would say they laid by the garden. I said, it's almost like we've laid by the garden. They would say that generally the last time they hoed the corn. We don't have corn to hoe. But I said, it's almost like we've laid by the garden, and now all that's left is the harvesting and the putting up part, which is the putting up part's Matt's favorite part. He says that there's nothing makes him happier than to be standing on the porch canning beans we usually cook them outside, outside on a gas cooker, a fish cooker we call it. But he said that sounds good to me. That's all right with me if we've laid by and that's all that's left is the eating and the putting up. So be sure to let me know how your garden's doing, if you made a garden this year, as we would say in Appalachia, how your garden's doing, and be sure to drop back by often as we celebrate Appalachia.